29th of April, and it's time to start inquiry session 2 on wildland land matters related to the RWE developments application for 13 turbines and associated infrastructure at Strathy Wood, south of Strathy on the north coast of Sutherland. I set out a full introduction to the inquiry and hearing sessions on Monday morning, and I won't be repeating any of that today, and it can be viewed on the webcast library if necessary. The only thing I would want to do is just introduce today's participants and confirm their purpose at this inquiry session. So my name is Elspeth Cook. I'm a reporter appointed by Scottish Government Planning and Environmental Appeals Division. I've been appointed jointly with my colleague Karen Haywood by Scottish Ministers to consider this application and report our findings and recommendations to the Ministers. Karen, can you just confirm you're there? Yes. Can I ask today's participants to introduce themselves, maybe starting with Mr. Fraser?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Vincent Fraser, Queen's Counsel. I'm appearing on behalf of the applicants, as you know, and I'm instructed by today I intend calling Mr. Mason, who I can see is on screen. I don't know if you want him to introduce himself or you want me to introduce him.
No, that's fine. Just confirming who's here. And we have Mr. Kelly. Maybe just confirm.
Morning, ma'am. Ian Kelly, planning consultant acting for Wildland Limited. In due course, I will call Dr. Carver to speak to his evidence. There will be no other witnesses. I sent an email. I don't know where it's come to, ma'am, but I sent an email last night indicating brief timings for this morning. I don't think we will be very long in either cross-examination or evidence in chief. Both will be less than 15 minutes. There's one small administrative matter that might affect us all when we're working from home. I've been notified that I'm going to receive a bundle of documents this morning. It has to be photographed at the door. So if they unfortunately turn up when I'm speaking, you will have to excuse me for a minute to I go open the door and let another bundle of inquiry documents in. I wasn't expecting them this morning, but I've had an email saying they're coming. So apologies for that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We'll know what's happening if you disappear. We obviously there's a in terms of our process this morning, it's fairly straightforward. I did get the email from various parties who were forwarded on first thing this morning with the notification of documents and your own anticipated timescales. We also are planning to have the fly-through document presented at the end of Dr. Carver's evidence, and just to say that how we're going to do that is we're going to ask Callum in his role as our IT support to project that document from his meeting user, and that way we'll all see the fly through at the same time, and hopefully Mr. Carver will still be able to talk over that and explain the relevance of the various views. So I think we can probably just move on now. If there, oh, sorry, I just want to check, does anybody else have any other procedural matters they need to raise with me? And I just want to acknowledge, we see that Mr. Finlay and Mrs. Pearson are joining us in the meeting, but Mr. Finlay did say on Tuesday that they are doing so as observers only, so I don't really need to introduce them further for the start of this session. So I'm back to you, Mr. Fraser and Mr. Mason.
Thank you, ma'am. And for Mr. Mason, as you'll be aware, ma'am, you have both an inquiry report from him and also a precognition. Mr. Mason, you've already been introduced to the inquiry, but I think just to confirm again, you're Jonathan Mason, Chartered Landscape Architect and Director of Access, and I think your more detailed qualifications appear in an appendix to your report. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now, Mr. Mason, obviously we're taking both the report and the precognition as read, so I think I only have a couple of questions for you, really, and then if there's anything further you want to add, by all means do so. But looking at Dr. Carver's report and also his precognition, it does appear that a large part of the concern of wildlands is the method of assessment, so to speak, and there's quite a discussion about really whether the guidance goes about matters in the correct way, so to speak. Now, the latest guidance, I think itself, is core document 11.18. That's obviously from Nature Scott, as they now are. But I think that was only published last year, and it's assessing impacts on wildland areas. So clearly, the guidance post dates much of the assessments that have been done by way of the original environmental statement and the subsequent environmental information. Can I just understand, first of all, though, I think it's addressed in your pre-commission in any event, the latest assessment that's been undertaken, has that been undertaken in accordance with the terms of the latest guidance on how to do it?
It has, yes. There have been a number of iterations of guidance in existence during the course of this project. But yes, the latest, the CRBIA undertaken earlier this year was indeed undertaken. The wildland aspect of that was undertaken in accordance with the latest Nature Scott guidance.
Sorry. So,
That was
sorry, I thought I cut you off. I do apologise. Secondly, obviously there are earlier sort of iterations, if I might put it that way, of the assessment of the impact on wildland. Those earlier versions of the assessments, were they undertaken with the what was at the time the current advice as to how to go about matters, if I might put it that way?
Yes, that's correct. So when the assessment work started, there were just trying to recall the precise terms that we used, but there were basically areas of search for wildland and wildland core areas, I believe they were called, and then that was formalised by SNH, and there were wildland areas that were then considered to be wildland areas were then defined. I think it was certainly subsequent to the 2013 LBIA and accompanying wildland assessment. And so in 2015, we assessed those updated wildland areas and the associated guidance. And then again in 2021, we've again, the guidance has been updated again, so we've reflected that guidance. So we've been cognizant of the guidance that's in play at each stage and have followed it.
And I mean, obviously, it's important that you use whatever is the latest guidance at the time, so to speak, Mr. Mace. But in practical terms, in this particular case, have the changes in the guidance made any material change to the outcome of the assessment, if I might put it that way?
Not to the outcome of the assessment, no. There have been changes to which areas of land we look at, because initially the areas of search for wildland were more extensive. That's been focused down to the wildland areas as now defined. But yes, at each stage, the finding was essentially the same.
And we obviously have the various consultation responses from either Nature Scott or SNH, as they were, and the council. And has any issue been taken, as far as you're aware, about whether the assessment's been done in the right way?
No, not at all.
And then finally, on that issue, we obviously see the outcome, the various mapping that's been done by Dr. Carver, and I think, as I understand it, we see it displayed at the end of his report in the various maps. As far as you can see, looking at that mapping, even if that were the right way of doing things, does that lead to any reason for you coming to, or would it lead to any reason for the reporters coming to a different conclusion, as far as you can see?
No, not at all. And to be honest, I find it seems to be difficult to discern differences between the outputs in the various iterations of the mapping produced for the various stages of development. There are, I think, 5 maps for each attribute. So that there's a map for Strathy North on its own. There's one for Strathy North plus Strathy South. Then there's one for Strathy Wood added into those. And then I think there's another one for the variation of Strathy South. And in each case, there is a map presented which shows different shading according to how wild the areas in the surrounding area are. And the shading doesn't change materially, as there may be quantitative differences, but I find them difficult to see.
Thank you very much. Is there anything? Is there anything else further? Excuse me, losing my voice back. Is there anything further, Mr. Mason, that you'd like to raise in chief?
Not chief. I think that's fine for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Mr. Kelly, you have an opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Mason now.
Good morning, Mr. Mason.
Good morning.
I've only got 3 questions for you, and I'd ask you to bear with me through the first 2 until I get to the 3rd question. They're not technical questions. I take it you don't live in the north of Scotland?
I live in Chester, in northwest England.
Thank you. Do you spend much time in Caithness, Sutherland, and Wester Ross other than assessing wind farms?
I have been other than for assessing wind farms, yes, but most of the time I've spent in those areas has been assessing wind farms.
Yeah, see, my 3rd point is just, and it's important to a client like Wildland Limited. When I read your assessments going right back to 2013, I don't detect any sense of appreciation or even love of this landscape in Caithness and Sutherland and Wester Ross. Are you entirely agnostic to it, or am I reading this wrong?
No, I'm far from agnostic. I think that the North Scottish landscape is very beautiful. I enjoy travelling through it.
And you feel that the wind farms cause no harm to that landscape?
Well, I think that the harm such that there is caused by wind farms to landscapes has been objectively assessed in the RBIA. And clearly there's a balance between preserving the beauty of a landscape and achieving what society needs in terms of renewable energy. I don't think it's a binary thing that you should have all or nothing. And I believe that in selecting the sites that are selected for wind energy development, clearly there is policy that directs you away from the most beautiful parts of the landscape and towards areas which have capacity.
So just to conclude here, you agree that it's a balance to be taken. Therefore, I presume you would agree that different people might take a different view of the balance.
Clearly, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mason. Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions. We have no technical questions for Mr. Mason.
Thank you very much. That's very short. I have one a brief question, and just to clarify, you referred to the S&H or Nature Scot guidance from 2020, assessing impacts on wildland areas, and we were asked to obviously open that document up this morning. That's core document 1118. I'm just wondering, in your view, does the guidance lead us to consider the generic qualities of a wildland area, of which I think there are 5, which are set out in that guidance? Or is it more leading you to consider the site-specific qualities of that particular wildland area that are described in the official description? The core document number, core document 1115, the actual published documents where each wildland area is described and given attributes. Which are the more important there, the generic attributes or the site-specific ones?
I would say it's a balance of the two. Clearly, there will be differing balances of qualities in different wildland areas. So those site specifics are important. But I think the methodology as a whole is looking at those wide qualities of wildland areas in general.
Yeah, thank you. That was the only question I had. Would you have anything? Yes, there's another question coming.
Just to follow up from what Ms. Cook asked you there. So, and that's what you've done in the latest CLVIA assessment. You've done is a balance between the two, the site-specific and the generic.
Well, we've followed the steps that they set out. I think that there is always going to be a balance between the site-specific and the generic, and I think in assessing, ultimately in the assessment, what we are assessing is the effects of a specific site-specific introduction in the landscape outside of the wildland area and what effect that will have. So it's inevitably going to be site-specific, but based on those 5 principles of wildland assessment. The primary one being the introduction of modern artefacts.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that's all our questions just now. We would give back to Mr. Fraser in case he has any re-examination we'd want to make.
I think even I'd struggle to think of a question in the examination, so I have not. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, we'll keep moving on. We're making very good progress. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Kelly, would you like to introduce your witness, please?
Good morning. Dr. Carver can come on the video now. Thank you. Morning, Dr. Carver.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
In terms of your evidence in chief, 1 point from the other day and 1 point from this morning, before we look at the fly-through, and I'll ask you if there's anything you want to say about the fly-through. You were listening in to the cross-examination of Mrs. Pearson from the Highland Council. Were there any issues that arose during that cross-examination and her answers that are relevant to your methodology for assessing the effects on wildland?
Certainly, I think the one thing I was struck with in terms of that evidence there was the discussion that went on about the ZTV analysis, the standard off-the-shelf ZTV analysis, in which the zones of visual influence are given as essentially binary areas. You know, can you see it? Can you not? And there was a discussion that went on in that particular session, which focused on visibility of turbines and whether a particular turbine being deemed visible meant that all of the turbine was visible or only part of it was visible, or what the effect of distance was on its impact in the landscape. I think one of the problems, and we'll probably come back to this later with the standard off-the-shelf ZTV analyses, is that they are essentially saying, yes, you can see the blade tip in the given areas, but what they don't give you is they don't give you a proper indication of their actual impact. It doesn't provide you with information on partial visibility. It doesn't provide you with information on their relative impact in the landscape. Obviously, distance from the viewer to the turbine has a particular effect in this instance. So, you know, I was particularly struck with that line of questioning there and the limitations of existing ZTV analyses.
Thank you. This morning, you heard Mr. Mason comment on what he saw as only marginal differences between the maps of effects in your report. Would you like to comment on the fact of that and the significance of the marginal differences?
Yes, certainly. I think the significance of the marginal differences are really down to these facts that we've just been discussing. Whether a turbine is visible or not is a moot point, which, you know, the binary analysis gives us some useful information on that. But what the techniques that we're using, and those are the techniques which Scottish Natural Heritage, now NH Scott, of course, used in the original analyses to draw up the wildland area phase 1, phase 2, and which were used to develop phase 3 boundaries. So I think the marginal differences are actually significant when you're in situ, because they are actually showing you as I say, these proportional effects, whether that's partial visibility of a turbine or the distance decay effect in situ. So whereas the maps appear to only show minor differences in their location, on the ground, the effects can be seen as quite different. And of course, this is where, and I'm sure we'll come on to this again, I'm sure this is where the fact that we're looking at field-based assessments based on professional judgment, and on the one hand, and a quantitative objective analysis on the other hand, that, you know, they are essentially paired analyses which support each, or should in reality support each other. So I think there's some interesting things to discuss there in the report which I've produced for Wildland Limited.
Thank you, Dr. Carver. Just one final supplementary coming from that. You probably heard myself and Mr. Mason this morning discussing the balance of factors, and he agreed that different people could take a different view of that balance. In the case of your methodology, can I ask you, is there any personal input to it at all, or is it the case that any competent operator using the same software and using the same data would produce the exact same maps as you have produced?
Absolutely, it's entirely objective, based on the data and the methods that we've developed originally for the 2 national parks, and then were adopted and implemented by SNH for the 2014 mapping. So if SNH repeated that mapping, they'd come up with the same results that I have, because we're just using the same data and the same methodology.
So again, I don't want to spin this out, but just since you mentioned it, was it a specific requirement of SNH in terms of the original methodology that it be repeatable?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Carver. Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions.
Right, well, we'll just move over to Mr. Fraser and see if there's any cross-examination to make.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Good morning, Dr. Carver.
Good morning.
Dr. Carver, if I understand your area of expertise, I think you tell us you're a geographer and expert in mapping. I think it is right, isn't it, that you don't claim any particular expertise either in landscape evidence or in planning evidence?
Well, geography is a broad subject, and my area of application specialism, as you well know, is on mapping wilderness and wildland and rewilding, and that takes you into a range of disciplines, including landscape, including ecology, visual impact analysis, etc. So whereas my subject area, my discipline is geography, I'm in the geography department, I've 25 plus years experience in this kind of work.
Yeah, I think mapping is what you tell us, isn't it, Dr. Carver?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, you know that my technical expertise is in GIS applications, which is mapping, computer mapping. And of course, what we're doing there is mapping landscape.
Yeah. And we then turn to your precognition, Dr. Carver, and I look particularly at paragraphs 8 and 9.
Yes, got those.
Good. My understanding is that your complaint, if I might put it that way, essentially is that the assessments that have been done for this particular project by the applicants and by others is reliant or are reliant upon professional judgment supported by field visits and ZTVs. We see that in paragraph 8. And the complaint really is it's all based on that and hasn't undertaken any detailed mapping of the sort that was undertaken to establish the wildland areas. I think, if I've understood it correctly, that is your complaint, isn't it?
I wouldn't say it's a complaint. It's a point, and it's just saying that, you know, state of fact that the work which is done by Jonathan and others is, you know, that's what it's based on. So it's a statement of fact, which leads us on to the work which I have done.
Yeah. Well, whether it's complaint or criticism or that is the area I think that you're flagging up as a concern, as I understand it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's okay. I don't understand you actually to go on and in any way suggest that there's anything in the assessment that was done by Mr. Mason that wasn't done correctly, or actually that you would take any different view on. I just don't see any analysis of that at all, do I, in your evidence?
Well, as I said in my preliminary responses to Mr. Kelly, that I see these kinds of analyses as being complementary. So the fact that the work by Jonathan has focused on ZTV's field visits and professional judgment, I see that as being complementary to the kinds of analyses that I have done.
Yes, I understand that, and I understand.
Okay, good.
You've then done this additional work, but the point I'm putting to you is I don't think anywhere you actually say, no, he hasn't done it correctly, or no, actually, I disagree with particular points that he makes here or says here. We just don't see any of that, I think, in your evidence.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, it's, you know, I see these as complementary, but I do see technical difficulties or limitations with relying on the binary ZTVs.
Yeah, well, I understand that. We might just look at that point in a moment.
Okay, good.
I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed something, Dr. Carver.
No, absolutely not.
I'm asking, maybe you think I'm asking a very silly, obvious question, but sure I hadn't missed anything anywhere.
Not at all, not at all.
Thank you. Now, the approach that you take of, if I might put it this way, remapping the area, isn't an approach that is sought or indeed advised in the latest Nature Scott guidance, is it? That's core document 1118.
It's not specifically mandated in that, but depends how you read the document. It's sufficiently vague that you can you know, read into that document. I mean, I can quote bits of it if you like, but I'm sure you're all familiar with it. But each of those sections could, the descriptions that are given and the recommendations for the latest guidance could involve this kind of remapping.
Right, okay. But I mean, again, certainly, I don't understand you anywhere to suggest that the approach that was taken by Mr. Mason was not in accordance with the guidance. We don't see that suggestion anywhere, do we?
No, as I say, I think it is complementary, and you know, the two approaches complement each other. And I think, well, as I say, I have some technical difficulties with relying on binary view sheds, but other than that, I think they're complementary approaches.
And indeed, your report is very frank on the matter, if I may say so, Dr. Carver. This approach that you take of effectively repeat mapping is something that you or your body made representations on when the consultation on the draft guidance was provided, wasn't it? And we see that, for example, dealt with in paragraph 1.12, I think, of your report, and you've also produced the consultation response as Appendix 1 that was sent.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So representations were made on your either by you or on your behalf as to how this should be done and what the guidance should say. And I think it's fair to say that for whatever reason, SNH and/or Nature Scott didn't really go along with your recommendations in that guidance. And I think that's also recognised in your report, isn't it? And indeed, you possibly have a professional disagreement here, so to speak, with Nature Scott, but you actually conclude that the guidance has watered down what is required, effectively, don't you?
Yes, I mean, as I say, it is essentially become a vague set of recommendations. They're not specific, but you know, I've read those several times, and as I read them more and more, I just see that they could be interpreted in a number of different ways. I admit that I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't specified that there ought to be a repeat mapping. I think that's what the original design specification for the wildland mapping in the first instance was for. And it was the implication was that the map would be repeated across the whole of Scotland every so often, 5-10 years or so, and repeated as needed in cases like this. And it's a logical extension of that analysis that one of the reasons for doing it was to allow us to make these objective assessments.
You see, if we just stop and think about it, I would suggest, Dr. Carver, that if we look at your report in particular, insofar as you're raising an issue, and again, if complaint's the wrong word, if it's criticism, something like that, or concern, whatever it is, as far as you're raising it, it seems to me that really your complaints, and I'm going to just use that word, I don't want to be, but your complaint really seems to me to be with Nature Scott and with their guidance, as opposed to with anything we have done for this inquiry. I think that's right, isn't it?
Well, I see my role in the inquiry is providing that information, that remapping, as you call it, or we can call it, to provide that objective assessment. The fact that SNH, Nature Scott, have chosen not to do that, I guess, is possibly for any number of reasons, of which I'm not party to. But you know, clearly I have the expertise and the experience, being the originator of the methodology that SNH used, and so I see it as my role in this inquiry to provide that information.
Well, I'm sure the reporters are grateful for it, Dr. Carver. But can we just take out, please, the guidance for a moment, and that's core document 1118.
Yes, certainly.
And I'd like to go to the first page of the guidance, which I think is effectively it's page 3 of the electronic copy.
Okay.
Everybody has that. We can see just towards the middle of page 1, we can see there's a section using the guidance, scope of the guidance, when and how should it be applied. And we can see it explains in paragraph 3, the guidance sets out a methodology and general principles for assessing the impact of development and other proposals on WLAs as they are experienced from within the WLA, not from out with. And it says it supports Scottish planning policy. It then very briefly explains the difference between what's required here and what one might term simply a general visual and landscape and visual impact assessment. And then, interestingly, paragraph 7 tells us a suitably qualified and experienced landscape planning or other environmental professional should undertake the wildland assessment. The assessment must produce an appropriate level of information to enable the decision maker and consultees to understand the significance of effects of the proposal on the WLA. But first of all, we can see it's anticipated and it's expected that the assessment will be undertaken by a suitably qualified person, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
And secondly, the aim of the assessment is to provide an appropriate level of information to enable the decision maker to understand the significance of the effects of the proposal on the WLA. So the aim is to allow the decision maker to understand the significance of the effects, isn't it?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So that's fine. Phone complaining that the batteries run out.
Sorry. And then if we turn on to page 3, a couple of pages, we can actually see the sort of assessment approach is set out in table 1, isn't it? And I think you've confirmed effectively there's no suggestion that we haven't done what is supposed to be done as set out in table 1, have we?
When you say we, do you mean the applicant?
I mean Mr. Mason and the applicant.
Mr. Mason. Well, as I say, there are different interpretations of that table, and Mr. Mason has gone through that and carried out a valid assessment using that suggested approach. But likewise, you can go through that table and, sorry, I'm just going to have to take that phone into another room. I've been through that table and done the same.
Well, I wonder, have you really? Because if we look at steps 3, 4, and 5, for example, each of them has an output, doesn't it, Dr.
It does indeed, yes.
And in each of them, basically, what is sought from the assessment is a clear and concise narrative, meaning whatever the relevant output is, and we can see in each of those what is then set out. So the key here is that we want a clear and concise narrative, don't we? Now, I'm not sure that we really get that from you. We clearly get it from Mr. Mason and his assessment, but for me, all we really get is the mapping. I can't see where we get a clear and concise narrative, Dr. Carver.
Well, it depends on how you interpret the word narrative. There's a spatial narrative in the mapping that we're putting forward in the report that I've written. I've not gone into great lengths describing views from particular viewpoints, etc. I would have done had COVID allowed, made a site visit and done some of that work. But the narrative that we provide is based on a spatial assessment. We're looking at the susceptibility of individual qualities through that spatial assessment, the 4 attributes of wildness, and the combinations of those to provide us with a phase 1 wildland quality map and analysis subsequent to that of the overall sensitivity to the proposals in the context of the other wind farms in the area, to provide an assessment of overall sensitivity. So, I would say that, yes, we've pushed all of those buttons.
Well, I'm happy to make some submissions on that, Dr. Carver.
Okay.
Now, you raised this issue about the sort of binary nature of ZTV analysis, and I just want to understand really where that takes us. I think we're agreed, aren't we, that what effectively a ZTV does is it identifies effectively the maximum area from which there could be visibility of whatever it is that it's measuring, whether it's blade tips, hubs, etc. That's essentially what it does, doesn't it?
Essentially, yes.
Now, the point you make is, of course, first of all, that that doesn't necessarily mean that you can see it from there, because it's the maximum theoretical visibility. So there may be other reasons why you can't see it.
It's not a matter of whether you can or cannot see it. It's a matter of its relative impact. Because if you can just see a blade tip skimming across the top of a horizon which may be 30 kilometers distant, then you really are struggling to actually discern that in the landscape. What our technology, our tool does, is it works out objectively works out the quantitative impact of that, taking distance decay and partial visibility into account. This is not what the ZTV does.
Yeah, well, I think you're making effectively the second point I was going to go on.
Okay, good.
I mean, the first point is that the ZTV, there may actually be other reasons why you can't see it. For example, because the ZTV is always done on terrain, effectively. So, for example, there may be vegetation, or there may be
correct.
Some other structure that might hide it. So, in that sense, it's taking a worst case situation, effectively.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And there's a second reason, which you've then, I think, identified why it's taking a worst case situation, because what you're saying is at the extremes, for example, whilst theoretically you might be able to see it, what you're saying is actually you probably struggle to see it in reality, or even if you could see it, it's probably not really having any impact.
But the converse applies, is that if you are closer to it, and your view can be dominated by that particular feature, turbine or whatever, and taking intermediate features into account. So, as you mentioned, buildings and trees. Not that there are many trees in that particular landscape, other than around the forests, the plantation forests. Is that it works both ways in that respect.
Yeah. So I mean, but I mean, the purpose really, what you're saying is, it's no good just having a ZTV. You've then got to form some sort of judgment on appropriate criteria as to what the impact is of being able to see in that location. I think that's the point you're making, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and what another advantage of the absence of modern human artifacts indicator that we develop is that it also takes into account all human features in that landscape, not just turbines, but other forms of visual human impact, to create an indicator of the overall impact. Again, this is something that the ZTV ignores.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, the whole point of the way that the assessment's been done by Mr. Mason and sought by Nature Scott is that you don't just rest on a ZTV, you then undertake that assessment as to what is the impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that requires effectively professional judgment, as indeed the guidance is making clear. That's why it has to be undertaken by somebody with appropriate professional qualifications, isn't it?
Yes, well, I do have a PhD, and I have over 25 years experience in application of these types of approaches. So I think, whereas I'm not a qualified landscape professional in the type that you're referring to, I am an environmental scientist, an environmental modeler, and I am the originator of these methodologies.
That wasn't actually a dig at
So
you.
I think that gives me some good experience.
Yeah, it's all right. It wasn't a dig at you as such, Dr. Carr.
Okay, that's fine. No worries.
I'm simply making the point that actually it can't be just anybody's own.
No, yeah,
it requires a proper degree of professional judgment, essentially, doesn't it?
I think we've got to come back to this point that the two approaches are complementary. Yes, I think there's always a role for professional judgment and field-based assessments. As I say, unfortunately, due to COVID, I was unable to make any of my own this particular juncture. But they are complementary approaches. However well you do a field-based professional judgment landscape assessment, you can only do it from a number of viewpoints, and you cannot possibly take into account the total effect of all of these across the whole study area. It's just not possible. So, as I say, I see the objective data-driven mapping approach as being complementary to allow us to assess these impacts quantitatively over the whole study area.
Now, what we've got to also bear in mind in undertaking the assessment here is, first of all, Strathy North is a fact in the sense that it's physically there on the ground now, isn't it? And then secondly, Strathy South with the 135-metre turbines, that has been consented, it's been assessed, and the conclusion has been reached that the impact both of Strathy North and Strathy South together, so to speak, the combined impact on the wildland areas is acceptable. Whether we agree with that or not, that is effectively the baseline we're proceeding from, isn't it, Dr. Carver?
I guess it is, and this is the case where you've got to consider these wind farms in total. The cumulative impact, and what the analysis shows that we've done is that Strathy North and Strathy South, and then Strathy Wood in combination, produce a significant impact on the wildland qualities in that area. And it forming, we started calling it the Strathy Wall. You've got this large wedge running into the World Heritage Site application area and the wildland surrounding wildland. So it is, I don't think you can take these applications in isolation very easily.
I know, but you see, whether we'd like it or not, we sort of can't turn back
Yeah,
time.
I appreciate that.
So we're in a situation whether you would have agreed with it or not, Dr. Carver, we're within a situation where it's been found effectively,
Yeah.
as you've accepted.
Can I just make a point there? I think whether I agree or not disagree is not the issue here. I mean, it's what I've done is an objective analysis. I've not, I've made statements to say that the impacts are potentially significant, but I'm not making a judgment. I'm really just repeating the mapping to show the spatial extent of the impacts, and then make some statements on and around that, taking the different wind farms in combination.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's helpful, Dr. Carver. So we're not to read any of your evidence, what you're telling me, as actually making a judgment, for example, as to whether it's acceptable or suitable. It's simply you're trying to present what you say all
the evidence. Yeah, it's for the reporter to make the judgments.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not trying to make that as a judgment, but this given effectively that as I've said to you, and I think you accept, Strathy North and Strathy South, the assessment effectively has been undertaken that's as acceptable. The real issue we've got before us today is to look at whether the addition of Strathy Wood to that baseline makes a material difference, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I must confess, I struggle to see where anywhere in your evidence you explain what that material difference might be.
Well, sorry, I've incorporated it to a sequence of remapping sequence, and I present the impacts as a series of difference maps showing the difference between the 2014 impacts, and then inserting Strathy North, Strathy South, Strathy Wood, and the variation on Strathy South, in order that we can see the spatial impacts of those wind farms and the proposal in question.
Right. Well, if we just turn very quickly to your maps, please, Dr. Carver. As I understand it, if we turn to page 59.
Yep.
We would see there, page 59, the effect of Strathy North and Strathy South.
Mm-hmm.
And if we then turn to page 60, we see the effect adding in Strathy Wood.
Yep.
And I must confess, to my eye, I've struggled, but I don't really see any material difference between the two, is there?
Oh, there's impact to the east. If you zoom in, I mean, this is obviously one of the difficulties we have in this situation. We can't zoom into these maps. They are static to a certain extent, but there is impact to the east of Strathy Forest, and there are impacts around. I mean, what we're dealing with here are changes to the boundaries of the Jenks classes. And these are the Jenks classes applied by SNH in phase 2. And I don't know how much you know about reclassification of continuous images, but they are, in this instance, subject to the statistical nature of the Jenks classification. But anyway, there are changes to impact to the east.
Sorry, when you say changes to the east, the area that we would be interested in, though, is the area within the wildland area itself, isn't it?
That's right. So there in the west-facing boundary of class 6 in the East Hallidale flows, show some changes, some reductions along that boundary. So
I must confess, I am struggling to see them. The reporters.
Yes, I'm sure you are. If you zoom in, you might see a little bit better, and flip between the two. It is obviously as a result of the potential impact, mostly visual of the Strathy wood wind turbines in that landscape. So they will be visible from inside the East Hallidale flows, is what I'm saying.
All right, well, there we go. I'm probably going to have to leave. I'm probably going to have to leave it to the reporters to have a look at it. But it's basically that comparison between pages 59 and 60 that you're inviting the reporters to look at, isn't it? I think.
Well, I'm inviting the reporters to look at all of the maps.
Well, where else?
Not just that one.
Where else are we going to see in the mapping the comparison between what has been accepted and what would result as a result of allowing this proposal?
53 and 50 pages 52 and 53 are probably a better indication.
All right.
You know, that's the subtraction of the wildland quality index, the phase 1 map with and without Strathy wood.
So sorry, are we comparing now 52 with 53?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Maybe you're going to move on to that later, but I would say that's
we can do that by all means as well. So we would invite the reporters to compare 52 with 53, and again, I think we can see what's there.
yes.
I don't want to rather repeat my points, but I would make the same point to you, I think.
Well, I think you can see that there's a greater variation in the extent visible there, and if you were to examine in detail the wildland quality index map itself on pages 47 and 48, there are changes in the landscape in terms of the absolute numbers to the wildland quality index. I mean, you cannot put an array of turbines of this size into that landscape without having some impact. And the mapping, the remapping, as you call it, objectively demonstrates that.
Yes, I can understand the point you make on that.
Okay, good.
To an extent, Dr. Carver, but the impact I would suggest to you is really already occurred. And in particular, if we, for example, were to compare page 51 with page 52, and that's the impact of adding Strathy South.
Strathy South, yes.
North, isn't it? And
yeah, I mean that's you know no two ways about it. This is a much more significant change to the landscape as you flip between pages 51 and 52, for example.
Yeah, I mean that one, it is very easy to pick up what the changes are there. You can clearly see them on the two maps that there are changes. You can see changes in the same way I would suggest to you.
I don't know who's looking at this digitally or on paper, but it's certainly easier digitally when you scroll quickly backwards and forwards between the two maps to see where the changes are as a result of Strathy wood, or indeed any of the wind farms in that sequence from Strathy North, Strathy South, Strathy wood, and Strathy South variation.
Well, I have to say I've done it both ways, and I don't think my point changes. But anyway, we can move on. I think.
Okay.
Dr. Carver.
Let me just shut that door because that phone is really annoying.
Can we just turn to? Can we just turn, please, to Mr. Mason's report, because it's probably the quickest way of bringing this up, if we could. And I'd like to go to page 19 of his report.
This is 16.1.
It is, yes.
It is, yes. Okay. Page 19. Yes, I'm there.
And you'll see on page 19, he's quoting from the lime kiln report. And we can see, for example, in the second paragraph of his quotation, that's where reference is made to the cumulative effects arising obviously from adding Holliston, but it also is clearly looking at the situation where we've got Strathy North, Strathy Wood, Strathy South and Limekiln 2 all being visible in a single panorama. And we can see a very clear conclusion has been reached where Mr. Mason has added the emphasis, just to flag it up, where the conclusion is that it wasn't considered the cumulative interaction between those schemes would be so great as to materially reduce wildness. Now, is that a conclusion you disagree with?
I would question it. I mean, obviously, it's a professional judgment. I mean, I simply present the mapping to show the resulting changes from that cumulative interaction that we've actually just been looking at. You know, the remapping allows you to do this, to map the areas of change, the result of inserting a wind farm or whatever development into a landscape. The remapping allows you to do that and show spatially where those changes occur and the degree, critically the degree of change as well, and then moving on the changes to the phase 2 boundaries. So, you know, to say that these wind farms, their cumulative interaction is not so great as to materially reduce wildness in that area, I'm difficult to see how that conclusion has been arrived at.
Just bear with me a minute, please. Sorry, Dr. Carver. I just need to just check something.
Okay.
Mr. Fraser, if you're needing some time, we are at the end of our first hour. Would you benefit from a short break here? And you could sort out your documents.
I am sorry, ma'am. Yeah, it's I'm juggling documents. I'm very happy with that. The other thing that just occurs to me, actually, ma'am, was we haven't had the fly through. And I thought that was going to happen before I cross-examined. Actually, is the
oh yes.
Is that something we're still going to have? Because it may be that I do have some questions. I don't know what's being said about the fly through at all. And so it just occurred to me, maybe that I have some questions when we've heard that as well.
Yes, apologies. I had in my head it was the end of Mr. Carver's evidence in the round, but you're right, it should have perhaps been at the end of his first evidence as presented to Mr. Kelly. Perhaps we take a break, and would it be suitable that we take the break just now? I make sure that Callum's ready to show the fly through, and we restart in about 10 minutes.
That's fine, ma'am. And as long as I get an opportunity, if I need to, it may be that I don't need to ask any questions, but as long as I get an opportunity to ask at some point, I'm happy, ma'am. Yeah,
that's fine. Is that okay for you, Mr. Kelly?
Yes, ma'am. Just to reassure Mr. Fraser, I'm not going to ask Dr. Carver any technical questions on the fly-through. I'm just going to ask if he has any comment on the visualization, and it'll only be one question. There's no supplementary. There's nothing. We really just wanted, for the sake of any member of the public that's watching, we just wanted the fly-through introduced formally into the inquiry. Okay. So if you show, I'll ask one question, then I'm perfectly happy for Mr. Fraser to ask any questions on it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's take the break. We'll set that up, and we'll slot back into Mr. Kelly and Mr. Carver, and then Mr. Fraser can come back to where he was in his cross-examination. That's fine. So we'll see you at 10:40.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay, that's 10:40. Now, before I ask Callum to actually press through, I just want to see if we can just get a little bit of clarity about some parameters of it. The first being the starting point of the fly-through. I've got in front of me, for the sake of having a useful map, figure 1 from the CLVIA from 2021, which shows all the wind farms within 45 kilometres and picks up most of the viewpoints that we've been looking at for visual impact purposes on Monday and Tuesday. But it might be if Dr. Carver has it, or Mr. Kelly, whether they can confirm where the fly-through starts from. And also, if I could just get clarity on whether or not the Strathy wood proposals that we see are the current proposals of 13 turbines, or if it's the earlier version from 2015. So, Mr. Kelly or Dr. Carver, I don't know if either of you can confirm that.
The fly-through starts in the west from one of the Monroes. Ben Kluberek, I think, starts from, and the Strathy wood turbines should be the 2000, the current proposal, the 13 turbine proposal. It's perhaps slightly unfair that this arises during Dr. Carver's evidence, but that was the only opportunity. Dr. Carver didn't prepare the fly-through, and I should explain that the fly-through arose out of some frustration on my own part and the client's part that we were still using a 25, 30-year-old technique of photomontages to look at the visual impact of wind farms. We had a discussion around how computer gaming had moved on in the last 25 years. And we therefore simply asked the client's architects, Grove Rains, could they produce something new, something different, showing the visual effect of the turbines? And that's how the fly-through arose. It's not anything we want to make a huge issue of. It's just an illustration of a different way of looking at the visual effects. The tie-in with Dr. Carver's evidence is that there is no subjective input to it. It is a pure combination of data and software. I hope that explains it.
Okay. So if, as a means, then I have a map in front of me that will give me a better idea of the pattern of wind farms that I'm seeing as we do the fly-through. So I can, if Callum's listening, hopefully he can now share his screen with all the participants in the meeting, and we'll follow the fly-through. Dr. Carver, I think you'll still be able to speak over this. I'll mute myself so I don't interrupt.
Yep, yes. Don't think I'll have anything to say, but yeah, if anything occurs to me, I will mention it.
If Callum starts, I've since clarified, I've checked back, we actually start from Ben Loyal, ma'am.
Yeah, so that was my opinion, because yeah, we are flying over Loch Loyal. And this is the River Neva coming up. Essentially side panning north along the River Neva.
Thank you. Thank you, Callum. It just came into my mind, ma'am, when we were watching that, so that everybody has the same information. Would you find it helpful if I asked the architects to provide a listing of the wind farms that they included in the fly-through, and then I could circulate that to everyone as a document so that they had the same information in front of them?
Yes, that seems helpful. Obviously, if it's just a factual, perhaps confirming, maybe even using a map. If it's not, if one of the other figures in the environmental information isn't sufficient, to use a map that shows which turbines we're seeing. Could I just ask a quick question? I know maybe not at the right time, but it didn't appear to me as if it had flown and viewed it from the wildland area. Would that be right? But I didn't feel like we came round to the east of the grouping. Would that be correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Yes, that's fine.
It was a fly-in from the west and then to the north and back to the south.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Kelly, do you want to lead any other points on that just now before we revert back to where we were in the cross-examination?
Dr. Carver described the geography there. I'd just like to give him the opportunity, if he has anything else to say on it, maybe that he doesn't want to say anything else on the fly-through. Dr. Carver, do you have anything to say on the fly-through other than the geography you've described?
No, not at all. It is what it is. It's a visualization based on landscape data, aerial imagery, and terrain data.
Thank you. Thank you. No more questions, ma'am.
Thank you. That's great then. So I think we'll just revert back to where we were and with Mr. Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Carver, can I just understand, was that flyover, so I'll get the right verb eventually, was that flyover, was that flyover used by you at all in forming any assessment or judgment in this case?
No, none whatsoever, no. It is, as I say, it is just purely a visualization from a bird's eye view.
Well, that was my second point. It is, I think, from a bird's eye view, and I think from varying heights, as I understand it.
I don't know how and how the decisions were made by the landscape architects to, which altitudes and which flight route they used.
But certainly the impression I got was that the altitudes change, don't they? I think that is right, isn't it?
Yeah, I think my feeling is that looking at that, yes, it's coming down from the top of Ben Loyal over the loch and then rising up and then down into Strathy, backwards and forwards a bit.
Yeah, it is. But what we don't know is what heights it was at. But what the second thing I think we do know is that it was at heights that a person in that location would be achieving. That's correct, isn't it?
Unless you were in a helicopter.
Adding further human artifacts to the view from the wildland, so to speak. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I probably need to ask any more about that, but thank you very much.
Oh, no, it is what it is, it's a visualization.
It is what it is, and I don't understand you actually to be relying on it as such. So I'm
not, no.
So it'd probably be unfair to ask you any further questions about it. Sorry, there's one document that I should have put it on my list, and it was the one I was fumbling with. Can we please turn to the reporter's report in the Limekiln inquiry, and that is core document 20.26.
Okay, so I've not got that one open. Let me just find it. 20.26. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, and when you've managed to open it, if you could please turn to page 71 of 134.
Yep, got it.
And we can see third paragraph down there starts the reporter's conclusions on wild land.
Yeah.
And in fact, just conveniently at the very top of the page, we can see there's a reference there to Dr. Carver clarifying his view during the inquiry.
Are we on digital page?
Digital page 71 of
which is what's page that in?
Sorry, were you looking? Right, hang on a minute. I will check.
What's the paper page number?
I'll get you the paper page number now. So it will
Thank
be
you. Yeah.
in a second. Trouble with mine is it flicks about. It'll be page 70 of.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah. Oh yeah, my name's at the top. Look at that.
It's very convenient at the top, which rather confirms, first of all, that you gave evidence at the inquiry, Dr. Carver.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And indeed, you were sort of making the same sort of point, I think you were making here.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it's complementary.
Yeah, from 484. And I think it's fair, if we went back to the previous paragraphs there, I'm hoping we don't need to, but if we went back to the previous paragraphs there, I think what you would get, it's clear that there was an issue between the parties as the appropriate methodology to use in undertaking the assessment. The reason why I don't think we need to go to it is I think we'll see the reporter's conclusions in a moment. But there was certainly an issue about the appropriate methodology to be used. And then secondly, I think there were issues about really whether doing things the way you were doing them was the appropriate way of going about matters. Those were two of the issues I think that were before the inquiry. It's a fair comment, isn't it, Dr. Carver?
Sorry, fair comment that what?
I think you would agree that two of the issues that were before the inquiry, which the reporters then go on to comment upon, A, what methodology to use, and B, there were criticisms of actually what you'd undertaken and whether it helped really. I think.
Well, yeah, I think it's yes. I mean, yes, there were criticisms, but there again, there were criticisms also of relying on binary ZTVs. I think they had different approaches. They each have complementary roles to play. Yeah,
I'm just flagging that there was a background so that we understand what the reporters then say in their conclusions. So if we just jump on a little bit in the conclusions, please. We can see that at paragraph 4.92.
Yep.
We can see there that because this was partly to do with the methodology and everything, so to speak. We can see 4.92. The reporters say while both parties are ultimately undertaking assessments using both the 27 and 2017 draft versions of the guidance, the matter of which guidance ought to be primacy continues to be pertinent to their respective cases. All told, we consider the weight we can give to the 2017 draft guidance is reduced because of the inherent uncertainty over what approach the final document may ultimately take. For this reason, we conclude greater reliance should be placed on the 2007 guidance as updated in 2014. So clearly at that time, the reporters were making the point that draft guidance, it's always a bit difficult to know what weight to give to it because it can change. We don't actually have that issue in this case, of course, because we actually do have the final guidance in the form of the 2020 guidance, which is core document 1118. That's correct. And so I think we can give full weight effectively to that, can't we? Yeah.
Yes, I guess so. I mean, it's the official final guidance.
Okay. And then what we can see is that there's then a discussion going on just on from there. The reporters discuss the methodology and how to approach matters, etc. And then we can see that they then, starting at paragraph 4.100, which is electronic page.
Yep, got it.
Yeah. I think probably normal page 72. We can see that they then go in and look at the various sort of sub areas that have been described for them, and they describe them in some detail. And it's also quite clear that they make it plain that they've gone and assessed some of these areas themselves on site visits effectively. That's correct. Yeah. So if we then sort of skip on from all of that to see what they do and what they've said, for example, we get an example of that at 4113 where they refer to their unaccompanied site inspection being particularly beneficial to consider perceptual responses, etc. But if we just skip on from all of that, we can see, can we not, if we go down to paragraph 4129, which is the top of paper page 78 and 79.
Yeah, got it.
We can see second paragraph on the page 4130. They come back to your mapping exercise, don't they? And they say the mapping undertaken by Dr. Carver for JMT is essentially a desk-based approach for informing an assessment of the overall effects of the development upon the physical attributes and perceptual responses for WLA 39 individually and cumulatively. Pausing there, that's essentially again what you've done here, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It's a repeat of the 2014 analysis.
And then I want to say, whilst in our view this approach to mapping effects offers some potential to assist with an assessment, we found too many discrepancies and anomalies were generated in the mapping to rely upon it to any meaningful extent. The desk-based approach also has inherent limitations, and as Dr. Carver fairly acknowledged, it's not intended to be a substitute for a field assessment. We found that the mapped predicted effects of Limekiln 2 were inconsistent with our own findings during site inspections. So I have to say, with the greatest respect, they didn't ultimately find your assessment particularly helpful in forming their conclusions at Limekiln, did they, Dr. Carver?
I think it, you know, I would say that there are other things in that paragraph which would indicate that it has, well, it says it has potential to assist with the assessment. The discrepancies that I find on the ground would be the same as the discrepancies that they might find in any other methodology. You know, I think, you know, and I was saying earlier on, you know, the role of field-based visits is an important means of assessment, but it cannot be it cannot take place across the full landscape. So yeah, you know, I think there are pros and cons for both approaches.
Yes, I think I'd suggested to you, Dr. Carver, that the reporters were letting you down gently there, weren't they?
No, that was very nice of them, but
as reporters generally are, they're always very polite.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, there's no detail in here to say that why they found it inconsistent on their findings. I mean, what was the weather like? You know, where were they viewing it from? You know, it's yeah. You know, I can't possibly make a judgment on what the reporters saw during their field visits. I'm sure they were very informative, but yeah, I'm sorry, I can't comment on that.
No, well, I understand. Thank you very much, Dr. Carver. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
I have a few questions. Hopefully they're brief. I'm just taking advantage of Dr. Carver being here so I can maybe understand a couple of the tables and figures. No point in worrying about it when I can ask the person who prepared it. If I can just get to the right page. So in Dr. Carver's inquiry report, CD 16.3, I'll just do some technical questions. If we go to digital page 64, which is the very last page in the document, which is the colour coding of potential visibility of tall turbines within wildland areas. So it's a very, very odd question, but I feel like I'm missing a colour when I looked at this. The dark blue is clear at area described as 1, and I think the wildland areas are 10, but I'm not sure because the colours are so close in the digital reproduction of the document. But it was I couldn't quite find 8 or 9 on the map, and therefore I'm wondering if 8 or 9 are missing, or if they're just so small an area that
they are, as you surmise, they are quite small in this instance because they are very, very close to this to the boundary of the wildland area. This comes back to the issue of how the Viewshed Explorer software works, and taking into account distance decay and partial visibility, and the proportion of your view that could be occupied by a turbine. So the distance decay effect is not linear, and you can you can, do this yourself as a sort of a little exercise. If you stand very close to a building, almost with your nose pressed against it, your 50% of your 360-degree view is occupied by that building. Let's say it's a turbine for sake of argument in this instance. As you then back off from that, the proportion, and I illustrate this in my report with the diagrams given, the proportion of the 360-degree view which is occupied by that feature declines actually quite rapidly. It's almost an exponential decay as those viewing angles narrow. So its proportion in the 360-degree view trails off very rapidly, such that at the far extent, we ran it to a 30-kilometer maximum, which was what SNH did in preparing the 2014 mapping. It's they're barely visible at all because of the distance decay effect. So yes, whereas when you're inside a wildland area, then yes, absolutely, you're all in zone 10, but around the very edge, then there is a thin sliver of 9 and 8. You can just about see 8, but 9 would be very slim. We'd have to zoom in much closer to see the 9 zone. I hope that's clear, but it is a very.
That's fine, because it's because the colours are so close, and I just wasn't sure if I was missing it.
Do you understand? Sorry, do you understand what that map is actually showing? Because at the last public inquiry, the applicant didn't understand what it was showing. I think I tried to explain it more clearly in this report than in the previous one.
Yes, I get that it's not really about Strathy North as such. It's about if you were standing there and there was a 150-meter high turbine, absolutely, you would see 100. You would at 10, you would see essentially 100% of it.
That's correct.
And yeah. So, and I was just wanting to check that because obviously at 411 of your report, I've not got the digital page. Sorry, but at paragraph 411 of the digital report, you refer to a 60% class and how that is one of the higher levels of visibility.
Yes, it's between the 50 and the it's in that 60th percentile. So it's in between the 50 and the 60 class on the map.
Yeah, so it's referring to zone 6 on this figure. Yeah, but I just wanted to query if I can find.
No, it's actually what you call zone 5. It's the 60th. So like when we say this is the 21st century, it's not 20.
Oh, yeah, it's the zone between 5 and 6.
That's
yes,
correct. Yes.
So if we look at the text of paragraph 411, and I was just wanting to check. It says the Strathy wind farm proposal falls within 60% class as regards, and it says to have the highest likely impact on mapped wildland areas possible. But obviously, what you've confirmed is that the highest impact would be at 10. And I'm just wanting to wonder why you've said that 60% is one of the highest likely impacts.
I'm indicating that within that zone, the highest likeliest impact would be 60. It's not going to be 100, of course. That would be required to be inside the wildland area itself. So it's in that 50 to 60 zone, and so the highest likely impact is going to be 60. It's somewhere between that in that zone. Depending on which turbine that you're talking about and where you're viewing it from.
Yes, so I should be reading that as that's the highest likely impact that would happen at that point, not in the whole geographic area.
No. I think I probably could have written that sentence a little bit better, a little bit clearer. But yeah, absolutely, that's what I mean.
And I have another technical question about your table on, is table 1 on the the digital page 38.
Page 38. Yep, table 1, yeah. Number of turbines visible from
Yes.
within 30 kilometres, yeah.
So you're saying it's the number of turbines visible, and then when we go to the right-hand side, it says the total is 3. So are we looking at wind farms in that column?
No, we're
wind
looking
turbines?
at wind farms, not turbines, yeah.
Right.
So as you can see on the on row 2, for example, we got Ben Clybrek, the Strathy North and Strathy Wood are greater than 30 kilometres from that particular Munro, but Strathy South is just within, and so a total of 1 of the 3 wind farms is visible from the summit of that particular Munro.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the figures that are under the heading Strathy North, Strathy Wood, Strathy South with the word log, is that logarithmic?
These are, yes, the voxel viewshed model produces outputs in both numeric and log outputs. We log them because the numeric, straight numeric and altered numeric outputs are such large numbers that it makes sense to view them as logarithmic, and of course it is an exponential decay effect, so it makes sense to represent the numerical values, and so a 0 in this instance would indicate if you go down to, say, for example, row 17, the Melvick trig point, Strathy North is not visible from that location, so it gets a 0, and neither is Strathy South, but Strathy Wood receives a value.
And so that value is it's the total of your assessment technique. It's not the number of turbines.
Oh no, it's not the number of turbines. No,
yes.
it's. I mean, yeah, this is again, it comes back to my criticisms of binary viewsheds, in that the numbers in the composite binary viewsheds are showing the number of turbines visible or theoretically visible from their blade tips, but in no way does it give you an indication of the actual visual impact, whereas these numbers are. They're giving not just the number of they're not giving the number of turbines visible at all. It's an indication of the proportion of the 360-degree view which is occupied by a turbine. And I say, of course, as they go nearer and further and high, sort of less of them obscured by surrounding landscape, then the number goes up.
So if 0 is when no turbines are visible, in that from that wind farm, is there a maximum figure that would appear when the whole wind farm is visible entirely, perhaps?
Yes, it's an interesting one, actually.
Where would the upper figure be in your scale, or does it not exist?
Well, it varies, because what we're doing is this is taking us deep into the technical issues with the tool, is that it's measuring, it's estimating the as I say, the proportion of your 360-degree view which is occupied by a feature relative to the background, and of course the background is the terrain surface. Now, of course, the maximum number will vary depending on how much terrain you can see from a particular location. So if you're stood on the top of a tall mountain, so let's say Ben Loyal, you can see more terrain than if you were in a deep, narrow ravine, in terms of total area. So the numbers vary according to the impact of the feature within the context in which it is viewed. So if you're viewing it from the top of a mountain, the number will be smaller, actually, because you can see more background and relatively less feature. If you're viewing the turbine from inside a deep, narrow valley where you can see actually relatively little in terms of terrain surface, but a big turbine, then it's going to have a much greater effect. So the maximum numbers vary depending where you are in the landscape, and that may seem to be, slightly strange, but it is yet another advantage of the software, that it takes the context of the viewing position into account within the landscape as a whole. So those numbers, yes, generally speaking, the higher they are, the greater the impact, but there is no maximum in general. It depends very much on where you are in the landscape. I hope that makes it clear that it's a
no, that's fine. That's fine. So
get my head around it myself.
So when you were referring to the quantitative approach, it's this logarithmic figure that you can use, and that's the figure that's informing the colour mapping.
Indeed, yes.
Right. Okay, so I'm tying that in. So really the problem perhaps for me is that the table title could have been more accurate. I have explained it better, because I was looking at turbines visible, and I was struggling a little bit with the numbers that I was reading.
Yeah. So yeah, if you know, I spend a little bit of time in the report on digital pages 17, 18, 19, 20, trying to explain what the software is doing, such that it's clear what the outputs are and what their advantages are relative to the standard binary viewshed software.
That's fine. And I've got one last question, which I don't think is, no, but two small ones. You refer to 4 attributes or qualities, but we see from the certainly 2020 guidance that the physical attributes there's 5 of them. We saw them just briefly there when we were looking at the Limekilns decision. There's 5 physical and 4 or 5 perceptual, but you're only referring to 4, and I'm just wondering, are you referring to the qualities you were given to do the mapping, or have we just missed one out by accident?
No, we didn't miss one out by accident. The 4 which I refer to are the 4 which were used in the original SNH mapping of 2014. So that's perceived naturalness of land cover, rugged and challenging nature of the terrain, remoteness from mechanized access, and the one which we've focused on here because that's the major impact is absence of modern human artifacts. SNH in the 2002 Wildness in Scotland's Countryside policy document referred to a range of attributes of wildness, and in the mapping process we combined some of these together. So, for example, scenic grandeur and scale, and the effects of terrain. You know, these have these are incorporated into multiple of those 4 attributes. So it was a decision that was made early on to slim these down, because in this kind of analysis you cannot afford to measure the same attribute twice, because you're double weighting something. And this has been my criticism of some of the global wilderness quality mapping. I know we're going off target here a long way.
A little bit.
but they do that, and I just say, oh no, you can't do that. You've got to keep it so that there is minimal correlation between the 4 input factors, in this instance 4 anyway, so that you're not double weighting.
No, that's fine. It was just I was having difficulty tallying the numbers of attributes, and obviously there are 4 site-specific attributes, and they're not labelled the same way. So I was just trying to make sure I'd got the source of each document properly. And my last question, you'll be pleased to know, is that I was just looking to see, I sort of half know the answer, but I couldn't see anything that indicated that the aviation lighting, when added to the turbine, could be used through your methodology.
That would be a different analysis. It was not something that we considered in developing that. Well, we did consider it, and you know, some of the, going back to the global mapping, they include these nighttime light layers, and yeah, no, it's not something that we have done. It would be possible using the viewshed analysis to develop those analyses, but we focused here on really, where we started today was a remapping of the SNH approach, the 2014 phase 1 and phase 2 maps, and lighting was not part of that analysis, so we've not done it.
Thank you. That's my questions. I don't know if Ms. Haywood has any. No, she's shaking her head, so that's fine. So return to Mr. Kelly. Is there anything you want to pick up in re-examination?
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Carver, latterly you were taken to the Limekiln inquiry report. Can you go back to paragraph 4.130 on that report? Core document CD 2026.
Yep, I'm there, yeah.
Paragraph 4130 and some of the comments there.
Yep.
If you are provided with accurate information as to the location and height of turbines, to what extent is it possible for there to be any errors in your mapping?
Any errors which may well exist are really only down to uncertainties in the data. So if as you say, if we're provided with accurate turbine height and location information and accurate terrain data and information on some of those terrain surface features which Mr. Finlay referred to, buildings and trees, then there is no reason at all why the outputs from the viewshed analysis that we've performed are not entirely accurate. Of course, there's no such thing as an error-free data set, and there is always a little bit of uncertainty in terrain data, for example. The Ordnance Survey is where we get our data from, the same data that is used for the ZTVs that Mr. Mason has been using. They quote a root mean square error of plus or minus 3 meters in the vertical accuracy of that data. And of course, the horizontal accuracy is dependent on resolution. So within those parameters, then it is entirely objective, and anybody repeating the analysis would come up with the same results. So there's no reason to believe that within those parameters that the analysis is anything other than an accurate representation.
Thank you. And of course, just a small kind of moot point on that. If you look at the last sentence where the reporters say we found that the mapped predict effects of Limekiln 2 were inconsistent with their own findings during site inspections, you can, because you don't have the detail, can you draw any conclusions from that as to who was right and who was wrong at any viewpoint?
Well, I think they're probably assessing different things. I'm guessing here, as I said to Ms. Finlay, I have no idea what they were basing those judgments on. I would be very surprised if it was visibility. I think they were probably thinking about other things and using their judgment as to whether any of the 4 factors that we mapped in that instance were different to their own findings. So it's very difficult to say what they were referring to.
Thank you. Just final area of re-examination, SNH, Nature Scots methodology. If you think back to the 2017 draft wildland impact assessment guidance, we don't need to go there. The content of the document is not material to my question. Was your institute, to your knowledge, the only body that was critical of that draft guidance?
No, I don't think it was.
To your knowledge, was there quite significant criticism of that guidance?
From certain sectors, yes. I think there certainly was, yes. If I remember rightly. I mean, there was a large number of responses to the consultation, of which ours was just the one. And I've not read them all in great detail, but I did go through and look at what I thought were the key organisations which would have a comment from the renewable energy industry through to JMT.
Just one final question. If you don't feel able to answer, please say that. Do you think, in terms of mapping of wildland and considering the effects on wildland, Nature Scott now in 2020, 2021 is in a different position from what it was in 2014.
That's a political issue, I guess. And I'm not in the position to comment. I have my suspicions, but I'm not in a position to comment.
Thank you. Ma'am, I have no further re-examination questions. That concludes our evidence on this topic.
Thank you.
Well, is there any other procedural matters anybody wishes to raise before we come to a close of this session? No, lots of head shaking, that's fine. Well, that's 20 past 11, and we'll just bring inquiry session 2 to a close. We're due to reconvene again tomorrow at 9:30 for hearing session 1 on policy, and we've already agreed how that would be changed slightly, whereby hearing session 2 would run on immediately after if the timing suited. And so I have nothing else to say other than to thank everybody for their contributions today. Thank you, Mr. Carver, Dr. Carver, just made that mistake as well. And Mr. Mason for their contributions. Thank you. It's been very helpful, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, Ms. Fraser. Thanks.